Welcome to Cohesive Friendship Unit. My name is Chris. I'm here with Jake.
Hey guys.
We are here with a very special video, our first ever two-person review, because this game is disgustingly big. It's for Fire Emblem Three Houses on the Nintendo Switch. We're going to talk all about it, give our final thoughts and impressions on the game, and we will be having a spoiler talk in a week or so that's a reason to maybe subscribe to our channel. If you like this, definitely throw us a like. Let us know what you guys are thinking about Fire Emblem down in the comments. Alright, Fire Emblem Three Houses. This game is so huge, it took us like 3 months to beat it to review it. So, what is our past experiences with Fire Emblem? Like, what are the Fire Emblems that you've played, Jake?
So I first started with the GameCube Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, and then I also played Radiant Dawn on the Wii. So it's been a while since I've been in the Fire Emblem game. I also went back to some of the Game Boy Fire Emblem games as well. But yeah, it's been a hot minute since I played Fire Emblem games until Three Houses came out.
Alright, so Jake's a little bit more old school. I'm a little bit more new school. I did start with Fire Emblem Path of Radiance on the GameCube, and then I picked up Awakening, and then I played two of the Fates games. I played the Conquest, and I played the Birthright Fates game on the 3DS. So I'm a little bit more new. He's a little bit more old. But what is Fire Emblem Three Houses, Jake? What is the core? What is the essence of this game? What is the genre?
So it's just like any other Fire Emblem game. It is a turn-based strategy, and you can definitely weigh in on how it compares to modern games. But from what I've experienced and what a lot of people have said, it has a very strong focus on the core gameplay, turn-based. It's boxed grid, so instead of hexes, they have square boxes. And it's very much based around kind of training your characters. So if anyone's kind of experienced with XCOM, for example, that game's very, very hard and very much focused around how you deal with losing characters that die and that sort of thing, whereas Fire Emblem has a very different feel of you really don't want to ever lose your characters. You really get invested in the story, in those characters' personal stories, and just building them up to be absolutely amazing gods of a character.
I always like to think of it as like video game chess. Like,
Yeah.
it's on a grid, it's turn-based, it's kind of chessy. Different
Yeah.
units do different things.
It's good. I mean, I always like to say that it's kind of a basic, pure realization of a turn-based strategy, but that comparison kind of undersells how much there is to Fire Emblem.
Yeah, it's super deep and super
Yeah.
character-driven, like Jake said. And permadeath makes that character-drivenness all the more important. So I'm going to talk about just some core gameplay changes and updates from the past, and then we can kind of, I don't know, maybe give our thoughts on like the core gameplay, the fighting in Fire Emblem, which is what you want to be doing most of the time. And first and foremost, there's no weapon triangle. We actually made a video on this. I was really concerned about the no weapons triangle thing at first. It turns out it is still kind of there in that certain weapons are more accurate, certain weapons have a higher chance of critting, and there is incentive to play one class over another, but there is no weapon triangle. Magic is totally different, and I think it is universally liked more than in the past, where you don't buy tomes that break, but weapons still do break in this game, but the tomes do not. And magic is basically per stage you get a certain number of uses for each spell, so you might only get to use your best spell once, and then your weaker spells more liberally. And the last thing is the class change system is slightly different. Usually you were just kind of locked into your class progression. Now every character has an enormous amount of classes that you can pick from, which helps you build basically your dream team. You can almost make anyone be whatever they want, which is awesome. And I mean, like, what do you think about the core fighting in this game versus other Fire Emblems, Jake? Because I was really skeptical about it, but I really grew to basically not want to go back to another Fire Emblem at this point.
Right, and I was also very skeptical, especially coming from the old school Fire Emblem, where all there really was the gameplay, and the core story. Like the interaction between characters was okay, so I was very skeptical. And if you're listening, coming from just watching the trailers and not having played this or seen friends playing it, I'm sure you're also seeing the same thing with the way that Nintendo marketed this, focusing very much on the teacher aspect of the game rather than the gameplay. But even with the updates that you mentioned, Chris, the gameplay is fantastic. I think this is honestly the best realization of the Fire Emblem gameplay. I do have some gripes on the weapon triangle, but overall I don't think it was enough to really hurt the game at all. I like the changes they made, and I like all the gameplay changes they made for that, so I think it's fantastic.
All right. Well, you kind of alluded to this, but what's new past the core gameplay? So basically all past Fire Emblems, usually you would go from one chapter to the next, and maybe there would be a chance to like grind and battle in between, but for the most part you were fighting and then reading dialogue. But they've done a lot to change things. And what are some of the new controversial, maybe not controversial additions?
Yeah, so the professor monastery aspect is the biggest change by far. It's pretty much all Nintendo pushed when they marketed this game, but the game is broken up by months now rather than story battles as it was in the old school games. And you spend a month at the monastery, you have a couple days, I think it's one day every week for 4 weeks in a month, where you have some day to either go around, explore the monastery and do various things, talk to the various characters, or do story battles, not story battles, but additional battles, and or have a seminar. And then the rest of the week is spent teaching. So that's probably the biggest change. They added that in. I was very skeptical going in, ended up really liking the monastery and just exploring, which I was not expecting. But I think we'll get into this a little bit later when we go through pros and cons. There is definitely a lot of repetition with the monastery and the way they set it up. So we'll cover that in a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, at least, like, I thought this game was marketed absolutely terribly. Like, I thought that the trailers just flowed really bad, and it just looked like kind of not cringy, but it looked rough.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I ended up really liking the teaching aspect. It wasn't weird, because I thought it was going to be weird, because Fire Emblem kind of has a weird history of you like dating your characters. They didn't make it weird, or as weird as it could have been. And it was really cool to basically like really drill into every character's stat if you want, and kind of watch them grow as you teach them. I thought the teaching thing worked really well. The roaming the monastery thing worked well enough. I would hope that they would make it a little better going forward, but I think it did okay for a first outing.
Yeah, it broke up the gameplay enough that it kind of hooked me more than I was expecting.
Yeah. And this was kind of reminiscent of Fate, where you kind of got to pick a path, but that path was basically determined by which game you bought, and this time they give you all the paths in one cart, which is really nice. I really liked that. I think a lot of the reason Fates is looked kind of down upon is because you have to buy 2 copies of the game. One of the routes means significantly more difficulty, but that's not really communicated to people who aren't like into Fire Emblem. It's just like a lot murkier. In this one, there is some repetition between the house runs, but it seems like the vast, like a solid half of the game is going to be unique for each run that you take. But the stuff that is repetitious, you have all new characters to learn about and level up and get to know, which is makes the combat different.
Yeah. And with the, as you were saying, with the story, there's the option to recruit a lot of characters throughout your time at the monastery. And again, we're not going to have any spoilers in this video as best as we can do. But as you're at the monastery, you have 3 houses, obviously. And as you grow with your relationships with other characters and other houses, you can ask them to join your class, essentially, your house, and battle with you during the monastery monthly missions or inter-house battle kind of thing, it's very cool. It's a nice way of getting to experience characters that are not in the path that you picked, but you were still really interested in trying out.
Awesome. So yeah, what are some of your like big takeaway pros of the game?
So since we were just talking about teaching, the customization is absolutely amazing. You can really dive deep. I mean, again, we're harping on the marketing for this game, but the teaching is really just an avenue for deeper customization for the character, which, as I said at the beginning, that is what Fire Emblem is all about. And I think the teaching aspect is a great way of doing it. There is actually a lot to it, and I don't think it is as well explained as it could be, despite having a ton of like documentation and tutorials in the game. I think there's a lot there that can get lost, especially with figuring out how to progress across the various classes as your character levels up. So, biggest takeaway was customization is amazing. Second one, classes. As I said, I'm old school, so pretty much as you said earlier in the video, your character is really locked into a path. If you get a swordsman, he is going to be a swordsman at the end of the game, no matter what you do. Whereas in Fire Emblem 3 Houses, you can go whatever path you want. And while they don't necessarily tell you what all the paths are at the beginning, you can pretty much figure out based on the little character icons. And you can plan accordingly. And through the teaching aspect, you can train characters into whatever path you want. And I actually found a lot of variety with the classes they had. I thought they were all very good. I did have some issues with the later classes, but overall, I loved the variety in the classes and the various options. It wasn't too difficult to figure those out. Yeah, and then a small additional thing that I really liked was the use of, it seemed like there was a bigger focus on terrain, and in the past games I haven't really seen that as much, but pretty much from the very first battle in this game, they tell you, use the terrain, use the trees, use the forts, use whatever you can. And especially on classic hard difficulty, it really makes a difference. Like, you need to use those terrain benefits to the best of your ability.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the best compliment I can give to this game is one day my girlfriend went out of town, so I kind of had the day to myself. And I had like a mental image of how I was going to do my day. You know, I was like, oh, I'll play a couple hours of Fire Emblem. I'll watch a movie. I'll I'll go out to dinner or whatever. I sat down to play my Fire Emblem. I played it for 10 hours straight, which brought it into like 3 in the morning. I then went to sleep. I dreamed about Fire Emblem all night. Like, I had just dreams of like playing it, which I guess my brain was like trying to learn stuff or whatever. I woke up and I like got off my ass and sat down and played another 10 hours of Fire Emblem. Like, that's like the best compliment I can give to the game, is like it consumed my well-being for a solid 30 hours with absolutely no other thoughts, including in my sleep, going on. So yeah,
Me too.
I like this game a lot. And there is a point where like it clicks. The beginning is slow, but like once it clicks, it like grabs you, and then you're just gone. I really liked the support combos. There is an insane amount of support conversations. If your units battle adjacent to one another, they have the potential to rank up in support, and then you get like a 2 to 5 minute conversation, and there's just so many. I can't, like, I thought about trying to, like, I thought about looking up how many there are, but it would upset me. I would venture to say it is in the hundreds, or like probably at least over 100. Tons of support conversations, just characters and stories in general, a lot more than a normal Fire Emblem game.
And they're all voiced, which has never happened before.
And
that's insane.
And like I was going into this thinking like we're gonna get some crappy like Breath of the Wild voice acting. I sincerely think the voice acting is very serviceable, if not just generally good. Like I think if anything, the writing holds things back. I think the voice acting is very solid.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was very good voice acting.
I was totally cool with the voice acting, which really surprised me. And then the last like really good positive I have is just the sheer size and length of the game. It took me 75 hours to beat this on hard classic without losing a character, and that was on one run. And there is incentive to play this game, I would say 2 to 4 times. So like you can do the math. That's a lot of game for your buck.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, we knew going in it was a big game, and as you said, each story, each house has incentive to play. There's a lot of variety there. It's not just 80 hours of the same game. But on that, I was also going to say that the game is really long, and that was actually one of the things I was not enjoying as much. And I guess I have to caveat that it's not necessarily the length of the game, but the repetition as well.
Yeah, let's talk about your cons.
Yeah, so the game is super long, and I think if it was just 80 hours of story gameplay, the story missions are great. Just get that out there. Story missions are fantastic. I have enjoyed all of them so far. But it's the monthly 4 opportunities to do like repetitious battles or something else. Pretty much every month you either explore the monastery, do a battle, and then do something else the next time. But pretty much always there's at least 2 repetitious battles. They're kind of like the auto-generated quests in Skyrim. They get very repetitive, and they're really the best way to help you navigate to the correct class in the later games. But boy, do they suck the soul out. I'm not done with the game yet. I've made it most of the way through, and I gotta say I'm running out of steam. I'm not sure if I have the motivation to get through. I'll probably power through because I know I'm really close and I want to see the story finish out. But those repetitious monthly battles are killing me.
Yeah, and I think part of that is playing on hard makes it.
Yeah,
there's a stronger incentive to grind as much as you can.
Right, and it's I don't know. I think that the amount that I mentioned this, that there's a lot to do in this game. I don't think all of it is as explained as it should be. And one of the other gripes I had was once you get to that late game, if you really feel the grind, because it seems like the late game classes in particular, I think they're the master classes or the level 30 classes, whatever they are, they seem to kind of require so many disparate skills. The one I was focusing on most recently was the Great Knight, which requires lance, axe, heavy armor, and riding, which are all very hard to get trained up on, and they require a lot of high ranking in those. And you can't necessarily just get them from playing the game. You have to actually proactively every single week teach that one character heavy armor and riding, and it's just so hard to get some of those late game classes. It feels like they just picked 4 random skills that you have to be really good at, and they said, okay, now you're a late game character.
The one that really got me was there's like a sword and magic one. I was like, how? And I think the thing that's like a little, I'll get into my cons right after this. The thing that's like frustrating about these level 30s is unless you look it up on a wiki, they don't tell you what skills are required until you're able to see mastery classes. You don't know what you should be aiming for, right. Which is, that's frustrating. All right, my cons, going off what Jake said, I agree. It got a bit repetitive on the non-story battles. That being said, there are paralogs that are interdispersed, which I actually thought were reasonably solid and could actually be pretty hard, almost harder than main missions at some points. But I think the problem with them is they literally use like 4 maps and like 4 patterns of enemies. I feel like that could have just been expounded on just a little bit, and it would have been much less repetitive. And I understand that there's some DLC coming out and stuff, but that's not what we're reviewing. Regardless, I didn't have as much of a fatigue issue. You get to pick if you want to battle or not, and there is an incentive to battle for sure, but I think I might have chosen to explore the monastery or chosen to rest or do something else more than Jake. I'm not sure. There is some weird kind of UI, UX issues, user experience stuff. A couple examples, and this is super minor, but it's a game where you will probably, in your 70 hours, I would venture to guess, spend 15 hours in menus minimum. Honestly, probably closer to 25 hours in menus staring at them. So the 2 big ones that I just like, and I understand there's a lot of menus, and honestly, they did a pretty good job, all things considered. But so there are items that boost your stats, like they'll give you +2 luck, +1 HP, but you have to use them on a certain character. Though I could not find a way to use that item on a character without equipping that item to a character, which is very tedious because usually your characters have whatever needs to be held for that character, and they're usually maxed out in their slots that are being held. So you have to unhold something for that character, hold the stat boosting item, use the stat boosting item, and then rehold the thing you put in storage. That, unless I'm missing something, that's how you have to do it, and that's just dumb.
Yeah.
And the next, again, this is minor, but it's like, come on, guys, like you're in here for hours. Support conversations, I really like them, but you don't get the support until you listen to the conversation. And I know that you can listen to support conversations retroactively, but it's kind of buried a little. So I would opt to actually leave character supports, which ultimately leads to stat boosts, unlistened to until I was eating a meal or just relaxing or on lunch break at work or something. And I could just sit down and listen to like 5 or 10 of them. And I would be missing out on stat boosts. If you got a support rank up, you should get the stat boost and have the option to listen to the conversation whenever you want, instead of having to listen to it to get the stat. It's a lot of like weird little things like that, where when you're playing a game for 70 plus hours, you start to notice and it starts to bug you. And the last thing I'll say is, I'm not a stickler for graphics, but this game can look like ass sometimes. They use literal JPEGs. Literal JPEGs for backgrounds, and it can look awful sometimes. And like, for a game that looks so bad, the frame rate was like, the last mission, the frame rate was, I would venture to say, in the like teens, if not single digits. It's bad.
So let's spend a short amount of time here, because I think this is absolutely insane, but the frame rate on your native console Switch on a game that does not look that good graphically, compared to games like Breath of the Wild that have already come out, there were constant frame rate dips just navigating the monastery and in battles. I mean, come on, guys, this is a turn-based strategy game. It's not like you are rendering tons of FX and particle animations. Like, nothing's going on here. Come on. It was insane.
Yeah.
And I think this is for Mr. Reggie out there, who I know is listening in. Let me tell you, the trend of not having really good looking games is starting to bug me, because especially with Fire Emblem and Pokemon, we're not looking as good as I was expecting. I would like to see a little bit more effort from Nintendo in their graphics department.
And there's the recent. I know that you didn't buy Link's Awakening yet, or if ever, but Link's Awakening just performs really bad.
Yeah, and like this is their native console.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
But regardless, wow, yeah, that it got me hot and bothered. Let's talk conclusions of the game. What are your? I know we just trashed on the game a lot, but we do really like it. What are your conclusions on Fire Emblem Three Houses?
So keeping in mind that I haven't finished the game,
You are very close.
I'm very, very close. I know how close I am for everyone listening, and I pretty much know how it ends. But taking you through kind of my experience, the beginning of the game is very slow, and the story in the beginning is phoned in. It is god awful. It's just like, that was probably one of the most disappointing parts of the game, was when you first get to the monastery and they're like, oh, we have no idea who you are. You're a teacher now. Your dad's going to do something else. Is he your dad? I don't know. And just like things just happen. And it seems like they just needed it to happen so that the story could go on. And no one even tried to explain it. But with that being said, it's like the first hour of the game, and it's an 80-hour game, and the rest of the game is fantastic. So you tend to forget that pretty quickly. The gameplay is great. The missions, the story missions are amazing. As we said a little earlier, I think this is the best implementation of a Fire Emblem game ever. There are definitely issues. There's definitely points that I think they need to work on, especially the graphics and the performance. In a game that really should not be having performance problems, those are some areas that they should work on. But overall, fantastic game. I'm very happy that I spent the $60 and that I've put in the probably 80 hours at this point to get to the point where I am. I love the game, and I'm very happy with the direction they've gone with Fire Emblem Three Houses.
All right, yeah, on my end, guys, this is a top 3 Nintendo Switch game for me. Like, this is in the top 3. This is the top dog. This is the game to buy in 2019 for me for a Nintendo Switch so far. I am anticipating Pokemon quite a bit. This is a must buy, in my opinion. The gameplay will hook you. You will dream about it if you're like me. And the soundtrack is honestly one of my favorite soundtracks of this generation. This game is just fantastic. It's a 70-hour game for one playthrough, guys, and there's at least reason to play 2 to 4 times. I'm probably going to start a playthrough in a couple months and go through that 70-hour experience again. I loved it with some minor gripes. We're not playing Nintendo games for the graphics, guys, so yeah, they suck, but it is what it is. With that being said, I loved Fire Emblem Three Houses. $60, easy spend for me. Would spend it again. And that's it for our Fire Emblem Three Houses review, guys. We have a little playlist for Fire Emblem Three Houses if you want to check it out. There will be a spoiler talk once Jake finishes up the last 2 missions. But yeah, let us know what you think of Fire Emblem Three Houses down in the comments below. If you like the video, throw us a like. If you love us, sub us. That's all for me. That's all for Jake.
Thanks, guys.
Catch you guys next time.